你有没有碰过一些同事在 deadline 快到的时候，居然跟你说，我不知道这件事情你一定没有跟我说。或者同事参加了一个非常重要的会议，没有跟你说，参加完之后呢，只说，我以为你知道呢。那这些可能就是我们所谓的被动式攻击行为 Passive Aggressive Behaviors。 那今天在这个单元中，希望能够提供一些回应的沟通方式。Hello， 欢迎来到 Executive Plus 主管与沟通力的 Podcast。I'm Sherry, an educator, certified coach, and style enthusiast. 我相信专业有效的沟通是语言跟逻辑的完美结合。
And I'm Nick, a startup consultant, corporate trainer, and late-night gaming junkie. I believe great communication requires the right mindset and solid frameworks.
我们希望带给大家职场英语的技能、跨文化沟通技巧与其他能帮助您成为出色领导者的工具。
Join us each week as we share our experience, research, and methodologies to take your communication and language skills from good to great. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Executive Plus podcast. Today, we're going to talk about that little nagging thing that I think a lot of people might experience at home from a family member or at the office place with a coworker or a boss, and that is someone being passive-aggressive.
So speaking of passive aggressive, 被动式攻击，那有一个心理学家就说了，其实没有这个所谓式的 passive aggressive people， 只有 passive aggressive behavior。那我觉得其实如果你不太确定这个到底是什么意思的话，我就用一个非常简单的 example， 也就是比如说你今天妈妈已经煮了饭，然后你今天想跟朋友出去吃，那不太想回去，你可能就跟你妈说，我要跟朋友出去吃，然后你妈就说没有关系啊，那你就去吧。Just go. That's around that passive aggressiveness behavior, right?
Right. That whole I just spent all day cooking in the kitchen, but really it's fine.
It's okay. But honestly, passive aggressive 其实呢，它的 definition 也就是 people who are not really forthcoming, they're not truthful about what they're truly thinking. They use very indirect ways or indirect words to communicate.
Other signs of passive aggressiveness might be like a very high amount of sarcasm, where rather than directly addressing how they feel, they'll try and mask it with humor or sarcasm or just find a way to cover it up. But it's not covered up to the point where someone's not like, something's wrong. That's not how you should usually respond to this situation.
And I truly think that passive-aggressive behavior happens a lot, and I think everyone could have that behavior at some point. And yes, I definitely have done that before. Nick is laughing because he's like, oh my God. I have definitely done the I'm fine. No, I'm fine. That kind of back and forth. 但我觉得其实如果这个 behavior 它没有严重影响到工作的进度啊，或者是人家的心情，我是觉得 honestly we do this all the time and I think it's okay. 但如果今天真的是影响到了你的整个工作的一个 progress, 那 of course this is a really big deal. Then we need to find some ways to communicate with this person who have this behavior.
So I think the first thing that we need to understand are what are the common triggers or reasons that someone will be passive aggressive. Now, this is more likely to be an example of someone who isn't typically passive aggressive. I think we all know people who, although Sherry says they're not passive aggressive people, but people who tend to lean on this as a defense mechanism more often than not. But in the case of you've noticed a coworker or a superior or someone you work with more often who doesn't typically go with this behavior, but it is something that you've been noticing. What are a few reasons for this? Well, one of the few reasons maybe is they actually have difficult news that they need to pass on, but they don't know how to do it. So they're trying to cushion the feedback or they're trying to avoid having to talk about this, whether it's a confrontation or whether it's a problem. They may not know how to approach it. And so the way that it gets handled is even more negative than just talking.
I think it's the indirectness that confuses people, right? Like, what are you trying to say? Is it bad? Is it good? Also, if they feel particularly powerless, 有很多情况之下，他可能觉得他自己是一个受害者。They feel like they're the victim. So they feel really powerless, they feel voiceless, and sometimes they will use this mechanism to help them to communicate, but not really successfully.
You'll notice this a lot when someone feels they have a loss of control. So we joke that in certain cultures, like the mother or the mother-in-law may be super passive-aggressive. But sometimes, like when parents are passive-aggressive, it's because they feel that, like, okay, the child is growing up, they're making their own decisions, they don't need me as much. And that loss of power or that loss of importance in someone's life can also make them feel very passive-aggressive.
Or it could just be they fear rejection. They don't want rejection from people. And I think this is probably why a lot of parents, they would lean towards passive-aggressive behaviors because they don't want to be rejected by their kids. And also their desire to be perfect. So these are just potential reasons why people choose that behavior.
So let's get a little bit into what to do or what not to do. And a lot of the examples we're pulling from different articles or resources. For example, there's a great video from Harvard Business Review and a few other places from, say, like psychology, talking about how to deal with passive aggressiveness in the workplace. And very consistently, the first thing they say is, don't call them passive aggressive. Like sometimes you feel that urge to call them out, be like, why are you being like this? But sometimes either A, they don't know that they're being like that. And so calling them out makes them more defensive. Or B, if they know they're doing it, that doesn't typically stop them.
Yeah. 当他如果已经在用这些行为的时候，你说他，你是 passive aggressive person， 他一定会马上的就是 No, I'm not. 那当然这个 conversation 就 it's going nowhere， 它也没有任何的意义了。So instead， 你也可以说 Oh, I noticed that you never responded my email。 那可能他真的是你知道他看了这个 email， 但是他从来没有回你的话 then just I noticed that you never responded my email. Or I noticed that you haven't responded to my call after the meeting.
In the case of Harvard Business Review, they even take it one step further where they say, after you've asked a question like this, like, oh, I noticed some action. Is there something going on? Or is there something you would like to talk about?
Yeah.
They will follow it up with like trying to reach out or show empathy and get the person to maybe open up or explain what's going on.
Exactly. And I think this kind of follows what we were talking about in the other episode, is that think about what could bring a positive results, right? 因为在这种情况当中，你会很希望想跟他们来吵架，因为有的时候可能真的是他的 passive aggressive behavior 让你真的是有受不了了。It could be very negative, but try to think of what would the positive results be like, and then try to convey it that way. So a second thing is don't label their feelings. 也就是如果他今天看起来就是很生气 don't say You look so angry right now. Or 他可能看起来非常的 frustrated. Don't say, you look so frustrated right now.
And this is actually a step away from, you've probably heard us talking about labeling quite a bit with negotiation and Chris Voss or other things. But in this case, they recommend don't label the feelings, but in fact, go to that third step, which is try to focus on what they're trying to say. I mean, understand the underlying reason why they're acting passive aggressive. Do they disagree with the goals, but maybe they don't know how to say it, or they don't want to say it, or they feel unheard? So like trying to understand, is it the goals that are a problem? Is it they want to take the project a different direction? And so what is that underlying meaning that you can kind of pick up on and then start to have a conversation about why they don't feel comfortable or they don't feel listened to for this particular topic?
Right. And I would definitely suggest for this instance, pick up on these keywords that kept on being brought up, right? 他可能一直在讲这个 project or 这个 due date， 他可能有某一些的 keywords， 那你就可以大概了解说，他好像对这件事情特别的比较担心，他可能比较有他一些 concern. So I think that's one way. And once you kind of figured out what they're trying to say, 你这个时候就当然可以来 clarify with them. Be very upfront about your concern. You can say, if there's anything that you would like to change about this project, what is it? Have them to tell you what that problem is.
So this is partially getting them to drop the passive part of the passive-aggressive behavior where they feel like they should just step out and be like, oh, I'm fine, or, oh, whatever you think is best. But by directly offering them that opportunity, now the issue is in their hands. Yeah. Before, it's very easy for them to push it off, be like, oh, they're not listening to me, or they don't care what my feelings are. But now if you directly ask, and A, they may decide to open up and be honest about what's going on. Or B, if they continue being passive-aggressive, at least you can walk away knowing, like, I gave them the opportunity.
And the next one is, don't take the bait. And this comes from the Harvard Business Review. Go for the positive response. 他们有的时候可能某一些可能写 email 的部分，某一些句子特别的会让你听的看的不是很开心. Like it may trigger you, but go for the positive response. And they give an example here is in an email writing situation, let's say these people write, oh, I'm not sure if you saw my email earlier. 他明明就知道你已经看过他的 email, but they go like, oh, I'm not sure you saw my email earlier, ... 那你这个时候肯定的 response 可能就是 oh, thanks for the reminder, right? You go for the positive thinking.
A lot of the thought behind this is that it's very easy to get into a passive-aggressive war.
Yeah.
Be like, oh, you're going to be passive-aggressive? Let me teach you how to be passive-aggressive. But what you'll find is that because passive-aggressiveness tends to come from an insecurity or a lack of feeling control, that when someone is confronted, not called out on their passive-aggressiveness, but confronted on it, they usually have to adapt their behavior. So when someone is just overly nice, an extreme example of this is if anyone has seen the award-winning TV show Ted Lasso. In that show, people are consistently passive-aggressive to him. But because he always has this positive or shiny response to them, they kind of get faced with like, oh, that's probably not how I want to handle it with this person. So if someone is writing something passive-aggressive, be like, as we discussed earlier, because I kind of pointed out to you many times, rather than also getting defensive or maybe arguing back, and just be like, oh, thank you for the quick recap.
And the last tip, which I think probably is the most important tip of all, is that it's not you. It's really not about you. And I think I heard this from a lot of different really amazing people on many different podcasts, and all of them have really inspirational stories. 他们都会说, it's never about you, because everyone is dealing with something in their personal life. So if people are being passive-aggressive around you and it's making your work just a little bit more difficult, it's not you. Don't take it personally.
Well, we hope you enjoyed this quick tip guide on how to deal with passive-aggressive behavior in the workplace. For links to the articles that we discussed or any other information, please be sure to check out the show notes. We'll talk to you guys next time.
Bye.
Bye.
The Executive Plus podcast is a Presentality Group production, produced and hosted by Sherry Fang and Nick Howard. You can search us on Facebook, 主管英文 Executive Plus. You can also find us on Instagram, Communication R&D, and email us at sherry@epstyleplus.com.